Hello, friends. There are those who are underestimating the outcome or the intentions of the PutinS, and I say the S PutinS in plural, which is the establishment in the Russian Federation. They are underestimating a very grievous danger, very real and present danger. If the officials of Ukraine are advising of over predicting or predicting apocalypse, they are wrong or intentionally wrong, trying to mislead the public. Basically, if Putin's invade Ukraine, and that's a highly likely, very likely possibility. Why do I say that? It's because they did that with help from Obama, of course. Them, that is Russia, being one of the legs of the tripod of Israel, that is of Iran's regime, Russian regime, and Chinese regime. They have support of the Western governments, at least on the table, cash, look the other way, and so on. So if the Putins invade Ukraine, that will be considered apocalyptic for Europe. You see, when they move in, they will not move out. And if any futile attempt is mounted to evict them from your country, whether it's Ukraine or Poland or anywhere else, what's going to happen has happened in front of you in Syria. Your country will look like Chechnya or Grozny in the last century, or Syria now, or Berlin in the last century, or Germany in particular. The Putins, when they come into a country, have no intentions of leaving that country. And when they come into a country, they will bring, for example, in Western Europe, they will bring a flood of immigrants from the Russian Federation, what's termed as Russian Federation. And I read a report that says at least 30 million in the Russian Federation are eager to immigrate out of that old Soviet Union into the West, not to Syria, not to Iran, not to China, not to Africa, into the West, that is namely Western Europe, namely Germany in particular, and the United States and England and perhaps Scandinavian countries and so on. So what you can expect from the hegemony of the Russian regime in Western Europe is flood of immigrants, and these immigrants, the majority of which would probably be part and parcel of the Putin's, the Russian regime. So they're not the benign immigrants who are out to make living and strike out on their own and make a new life. No. There will be tentacles of the Russian regime, and they will be controlled by Russia, by Putin's. It's that simple. And you rest assured that the U.S., being the power in the West, outside of the Russian hegemony, will not act. They will look the other way, or they will make some commotion or noise about opposing Russia, but in fact they don't. If you want me to prove this point, look what happened in Syria. They took over in the east, the United States east of the Euphrates and Iraq, and eventually they gave up the grounds willingly to Russian forces and Iran's forces. So to make the point about this alliance or foundation of Russia's regime, Iran's regime, and Chinese regime as the basic foundation for Israel or tripod of Israel is well made. I can write a book about that landscape, and none would be less factual than that landscape that I will describe. I will not write this book, of course. So if Russia moves into Ukraine and then say a successful attempt is mounted to evict them, Ukraine will look like Syria. if there is any success in mounting that eviction. They will move in. They did demonstrate that to you in Kazakhstan very late, as of late, and lucky it was few hundred. Otherwise, if it was a real revolution to evict the Russians out, Kazakhstan would have looked like Syria by now. Millions dead, millions are refugees, and that's that. So aside from being apocalyptic in terms of invading Europe, the economic situation of Europe and the economic fundamentals of Europe will be under the influence and control of the PutinS period. And again, look in Syria, they in fact own now the resources such as phosphates, such as ports, such as oil, such as... It's no different, folks. I don't need to prove these points, you know them. So if Russia invades Ukraine, for Europe, that's apocalyptic, or the start of it, to say the least, because they will not stop there. Those Russians, PutinS, intend to restore at least the territorial part of the Soviet Union, at least in the least. That includes Poland, that includes Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, that includes the Baltics and East Germany, and in fact, I can tell you now, they will come back to dominate entire Germany and entire West in general. And you may say, well, that's changed, like the last century it was communism, this century it's democracy. There is no democracy, folks, in Russia, and people are eager to leave the country, and there's poverty. You folks have intelligence systems and know about it, and I know what you're talking about. I know you know what I'm talking about. And if all happens and they take over Western Europe, you will see that they will immediately tighten the noose on the individual liberties and economic situation of the family and the individual and the country in general. And this is no different from Iran. Look at Iran's situation, and you may say, well, look, China is prosperous. China is prosperous because China is under the population of Chinese population under the hegemony or under the control of the regime are totally brainwashed. And right now their situation is not as good. It has that, they put out this bright picture and prosperity about China, but China is hollow now. Like when you listen to the supply chain and so on, wars that is hitting the world, China is hollow. China is having difficulties. China is under debt. China has absolutely no certain future, and the more weight it takes on, whether it's debt, whether it is anything else, China is suffering. China's future is not going to be better than it is now, and the curve is actually moving downward. But in Europe, Europe is different. Europe is no different from the Middle East, those Arabs of Syria and Iraq and so on, and Iran and Egypt, and whoever it is. The fate of them will be as such, basic and simple. The circle has completed. The West established Israel, and now Israel comes back by other means and ways, and they will not be as good to you, that's for sure. Or as merciful, or as nice, or you were made basically. Imagine last century. And while you may not see a firestorm that's going to burn Germany, you will see a human storm, an economic storm that is basically going to burn Germany or England. Or I don't think England is doing good anyway in the first place. So as you can see, things are moving that way, and it's apocalyptic. So that's what it is. For now, it is okay, Mr. Kuleba, Dimitro Kuleba, it's okay to overpredict than underpredict. You need to get people up and moving and rouse them into resistance. Those who underpredicted PutinS, meaningly the brothers Stalin and Lenin, and in between, all the way to Putin, and I think the one in charge now who's Lavrov and his circle. who really are basically Israelis puppets for Israel, right? Those who underprotected them came to a grieving end, a grieving situation, a grievous situation, if you will. Was not nice on the human tragedy or economic calamity or being under duress and so on. Last century is a witness, and this century is a witness in Syria and in Chechnya and in Iran and here and there. I don't need to explain that to you. My evidence is right out in the open. If I tell it to you, I will be wasting time in this video. So it is okay to overpredict than underpredict, and this point is proven. There are those who think that the Cold War was over, and is over. Can't be more wrong. Cold War was never over, is never over, and will only be over if the Putins have total control of Europe, like communism, real communism, modern day communism. Maybe they don't use the same name, but that's the same thing all over again. And it never was, and it never is. Now, what happened in the last century, you guys are being deceived by the Soviet Union collapsing and leaving Europe, allowing countries to become independent, such as Poland or Baltics or Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria or Caucasus or Central Asia and so on, the republics. Fact of the matter is, they didn't have intentions, their intentions were to stay and not leave. But why did they leave and allow this to happen? Last century, perestroika and so on, all of those, you were fooled by those slogans and those movements and so on. And then you went to sleep, allowing them to re-emerge. And they re-emerged, like they did. They had no choice but to do that. They basically collapsed, and you can thank Afghanistan for that, those Arabs and Afghan and so on, which caused the collapse of the Soviet Union. And they had no choice. So in a way, they did pull the Soviet Union from the East out of the West. The Soviet Union basically just collapsed based on that. But that does not mean that ended. If they come back now into Europe, and that's their plan, not just plan, this is their strategy, this is, and all the tactics center around it, basically and simply. There is no avoiding that. That's what they intend to do. If the Putins come back into Europe, this time they will not leave. And if they have to leave, if any attempt is made or mounted on making them leave, your country will look like that of Syria and Chechnya and Berlin and Germany in the last century, basic and simple. And they will not leave. And they will own your resources. They will own your economy. They will own your resources. They will flood your countries with immigrants from the East. So if you see people coming from, Shiite people coming from Afghanistan or Iran or Iraq or Kurdistan or Pakistan or East, Russians and so on, you will see millions of those. Yet there will be a major flood coming into your countries, because the situation back there, after the control of the Soviet Union, after control of the Russian regime and the Iran's regime and around the Middle East, there is no hope, basic and simple. People know that deep down inside. They know that the situation is bad, but it's not going to change. It's going to worsen. So their only way of fixing that is really looking west, migrating west, and look into Africa as well. Now there are although it's lightweight immigration on both on the Mediterranean and so on. This may increase if the economic situation and human the freedoms deteriorate further. Immigration will increase. It's that simple. So as you can see, invasion of Ukraine for you Europeans, especially those Scandinavian countries and Baltic, Scandinavian have not been under the rule of the Putins before, but the Baltics do. They do recall, and Germany does recall, and those who are neighbors like West Germany and Holland and Spain and the Scandinavian countries and France, as people, I'm not talking about the governments, as people, they do recall those old people, who were there around the last century when the Soviet Union was still around. They do recall that. The situation, at least in East Germany, was very bad. Economically, human rights, freedoms, it deteriorated so bad that people would seize a chance to run from East Germany into West Germany, even if they were shot at, even if they would risk their lives to skip and jump over the fence or the wall between East Germany and West Germany. You know that. I don't need to tell you about that. If the PutinS take over, your situation will be so bad and so miserable that you will wish that you reacted now when they're invading Ukraine and not wait until that happens. Now you may think, oh, it happens and back and forth and eventually they will leave again. Not this time, folks. This time they made sure Afghanistan is not going to cause them to collapse again. They're going to avoid that mistake altogether. So it's okay to overpredict. It is okay to overpredict now. It's okay to overreact. And believe me, you want to really counter the PutinS on Ukraine's border. Not wait until they come to you. If they come into Ukraine, Ukraine is gone. And even from Ukraine itself, you may find immigration flooding westward, because those people do realize what happened to Ukrainians in the Luhansk and Donbass region, and Luhansk, and then it's basically it's wasteland now. I mean, I can clearly see that a lot of people just basically abandoned it. They don't want to be under the rule of the PutinS. So what do you think is going to happen if the PutinS take over Ukraine? A lot of people from Ukraine itself are going to flood west because they don't want to be similar to when the Soviet Union took over Berlin and Eastern Germany. During the process, during the events when Stalin was and Roosevelt and so on, people started running from east to west because they know what these PutinS are all about and how they live and how they treat other humans and so on. And if you think this is different now, think again. And intentionally, PutinS will intentionally flood Europe with those immigrants, which they control, which they deem good for destroying Europe and removing society from where it was. You don't know those people who come from Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan and so on. You don't know them. You folks do not know them. You do not know how, when a human being is stripped of his or her soul and spirit and ethics and humanity, you don't know how they will act. And they're being trained. You have no clue to how much they're being trained to harm others and destroy others and so on. My advice to you folks is overreact now before you have no way to react later. Okay. So that's the Cold War. Cold War is not over. Never was, never will. So long PutinS are in there and they're there. That Cold War, you need to fight it now. In January 6th this year, or last year, right? They nearly took over the White House. And if they have taken over the White House, the first thing they will do is shear off the Constitution, meaning there is a rule now will happen by way of decree, like dictators decree, similar to Stalin. So Stalin no longer has to abide by the rule of courts and justice and constitution and so on. And by then, bloodletting will have started, similar to Germany, similar to Russia, similar to Iran. Well, do I need to provide explanation to that? Yes, I will. Give me a second. In Russia, after the two brothers took over, Stalin and Lenin, they murdered millions that you do not talk much about. Those millions were the very same ones who shouldered and made the revolution, communist revolution, successful. Those very same ones, they were basically destroyed and put to the gulags, into the gulags, and they were basically wiped out. Iran the same way. When Khomeini came back, Ayatollah Khomeini came back from France, within the year or so, he sheared off completely, took out the class that shouldered what they term as Islamic revolution. killing its leaders, and then like 250,000, probably 350,000 in the first year alone, or first and second year alone. And these were people who effectively removed the Shah and brought him and his junta about. Same thing in Germany. When the Nazis took over, and Nazism is a sister of communism, right? No, I don't mean in concepts and dogma and dark understanding or dogma of the view of the world, dark view of the world. No. They're sisters, really makers and origination and purpose. And no, they're made by the same factory. The Nazis sent the SS to kill the stormtroopers, and we know that the stormtroopers are the ones who brought them into power, and they were destroyed. And I can repeat this song again in Syria and in Cuba and in South America and here and there. This is apocalypse, folks, but it's moving very slow. Is the point I'm trying to make here. If you allow the Russians to come into your country, some of you will be put to sleep, especially in those countries that weren't touched by communism before in the last century, like Scandinavia and so on. Oh, they will take certain class of you and put them to sleep right there and then. And the rest will be basically cattle, flock of sheep and donkeys and so on, meaningly to serve. They will convert Europe into an animal farm, that's all. The big brother, whose last name is Mr. Jones or Eunice, will come back and restore order in the animal farm. The big brother, meaningly in 1984. You think I'm exaggerating here? Oh, look again, you guys. Those who haven't seen this happen in the last century are not awake. So that's that. So I have a bitter fact for you guys, Europeans, and this is for the citizens. Russian regime being one of the legs of the tripod of Israel is supported by Western government, period. Not that they have the choice, but they're the same, really. So United States and its allies, like Britain and here and there, are putting out a lot of commotion. But they, in fact, under table, they are supporting the Russian regime and the PutinS, and they will turn their face the other way, like I said, like they did in Syria, and whatever areas they took over in east of the Euphrates, they now gave to Russia and its allies and Iran and so on and so forth willingly, and they moved on. And they did the same thing in Iraq. After fixing a government that is a tentacle of Iran, they just basically moved out. Am I wrong? I'm not wrong. And my other evidence is, look at the Brexit. Brexit was voted twice. Like the British people voted twice for Brexit. What happened to Brexit? Guess what? All those EU countries and their regimes and the EU Union, right? They support Russia, and when time comes, they will just abdicate and move on and allow you masses of Western Europe to be under the control, like animal farm under the control of the PutinS. Make no mistake about that. You can see that in them. They stifled that Brexit, basic and simple. Brexit happened, but didn't happen. Just look again. And the very same keepers of Brexit who bloat and gloat and bleat and so on about working for Brexit, supposedly its leaders are really against it. The British people were shown that it's not up to you to leave the European Union, no. And the European Union is a transitory for totalitarianism. And that is slow. The trouble with you guys, you won't realize it, is because it is slow moving, like an anemone in the sea, right? Those starfish, they're predators, but you don't see them moving, but they move very slow. But once they're over the prey or they want to scavenge or cannibalize, speed up the picture, and it's horror. It's a side of horror. Europeans, remember, this is a slow movement westward, and its intentions are not as good as you think it is. No. Oh, no. Oh, no. Whether it's economically or socially or politically or historically, you as a nation with all your fundamentals as a nation, whether you're Scandinavian or German or Baltic or Polish or French or whoever it is, or Spanish or Italian or whoever it is. The plan now, and it's slowly being executed, is to remove that past completely, and you would become something similar to the Alawites of Syria, the regime, people of the regime in Syria or Iran or here and there. I don't need to come here and sit down here and explain to you about them. Just go ahead and study them. Basically, they go kill and get killed, and they live on those conscripts of the Syrian regime, while the regime is living like royalties, right? You know, like the Big Brother. Remember, you know, he's got wine and good TV he can turn off and so on. Those conscripts, and go check it out in Syria, those who go about killing innocent civilians and raping and pillaging and so on and so forth, they eat onions and boiled potatoes, basic and simple. Right now, the monthly salary they receive from the government for just being a soldier or a conscript killing people is enough to buy each and every family 2 stacks of breads a day, period. People are there now thinking, you know, like they don't like what's happening. Where are they gonna go? I don't know. Maybe they will flood Europe too as refugees. Have a nice day, my friends. And these times are, you were in World War II. When war started like happening, people were very anxious and very alert and very reactive. Right now, you're lethargic, you know, you'll just bewildered. But today's events are far more consequential and serious to you as a European citizen's health and wealth and lifestyle and history, far more serious and consequential, believe me, far more serious and consequential than World War I and World War II put together and whatever happened before them. Have a nice day, my friend, and do over predict and overreact. Don't under predict and underreact.